The goal of shooting safety is 0 accidents. Every shooter should expect to enjoy a lifetime of shooting and never experience a shooting accident. Every range should expect to have a perfect safety record. All shooting accidents are preventable if proper safety rules are followed. Shooting safety rules work because they are redundant. Following just one safety rule is never enough. Shooters must strive to follow the 3 basic gun safety rules and the range safety rules at all times. Gun and range safety starts and ends with 3 basic gun safety rules. Safety is based on 3 key words: muzzle, action, trigger. Remember the keyword MAT. The muzzle is defined as the point on any firearm where the bullet exits the barrel. The muzzle of the firearm must always be pointed in a safe direction. The muzzle must never be pointed at another person. On a range, the safest direction to point the muzzle is up in the air or down range. Becoming a safe shooter means developing the ability to always control the direction the muzzle points. Maintaining safe muzzle control is particularly important when loading and unloading the pistol or rifle. The action of the pistol or rifle must always be open when a gun is handled at home, on the way to or from the range, and when on the range. A semi-automatic pistol action is open and unloaded only when the magazine is removed and the slide is locked back and the chamber is empty. A revolver action is open and unloaded only when the cylinder is open and all chambers in that cylinder are empty. A rifle action is open and unloaded only when the bolt is locked open and to the rear and the magazine is out or empty and the chamber is empty. The only time the action may be closed is when the pistol or rifle is on the firing line, in the shooter's hands, after the preparation period to begin has been given, or the command to load has been given.
With bolts remaining open, load!
When shooting is finished, or when the pistol or rifle is placed down to take a break, the action must be open and the gun must be unloaded, even if the pistol or rifle is left on the firing line. A pistol or rifle may not be removed from the firing line unless the action is open and the gun is unloaded. The Civilian Marksmanship Program strongly encourages the use of open bolt indicators in all range firing. Open bolt indicators are inserted in the open action and chamber. This allows range officials and other shooters to confirm at a glance the action is open and the chamber is empty. The pistol or rifle action may be closed when it is placed in a gun case, but the action must be open immediately when it is removed from that case. Keep your finger off of the trigger and outside the trigger guard until the pistol or rifle is in the firing position and until you are actually preparing to fire a shot by beginning to aim at your target. Always keep your finger outside of the trigger guard when loading the pistol or rifle and placing it in the shooting position. Shooters must develop the habit of not placing their index finger on the trigger until they are beginning to aim at their target. Shooters must know the basic rules of gun safety. A range officer or other designated person is in charge of firing at every range. The commands and instructions of the range officer or person in charge of firing must be obeyed. Range officers must check pistols and rifles brought to the range to be sure the actions are open and the gun is unloaded. When shooting is finished, range officers must check the pistols and rifles to be sure the actions are open and again that the guns are unloaded. Be sure you know the range commands that are used on the range where you fire. No shooter may load a pistol or rifle until the command to load is given. No shooting may begin until the command commence firing is given. Whenever the command cease fire is given, no further attempt to fire a shot may be made. The pistol or rifle must immediately be taken down, the action opened, and all cartridges and magazines removed from that gun.
Cease fire! Cease fire! Cease fire! Shooters, stand easy. We have a boat in the impact area.
Shoot only at the target designated for you. Be sure your target is properly placed on a safe target frame in front of a safe backdrop. Shooting at any object on a range besides your own target is strictly forbidden. Pistol and rifle muzzles must remain pointed downrange or up above the target whenever the gun is loaded and the action is closed. Special care must be taken to assure that the muzzle is never allowed to point at a neighboring shooter or towards any area behind the firing line during cocking and loading. Whenever it is necessary for shooters or range officers to go downrange to place or retrieve targets or for any other purpose, all pistol and rifle actions must be opened and rifles placed on the shooting bench or on the ground. No one may go downrange until authorized to do so by the range officer. No one may handle a pistol or rifle while any person is downrange. All shooters and spectators are urged to wear eye and hearing protection whenever they shoot pistols or rifles. Wearing eye and hearing protection is now required on most ranges. Finally, you must learn to treat every pistol, rifle, or shotgun as if it were always loaded. Even if you are sure your pistol, rifle, or shotgun is unloaded, and even if a range officer has checked it, treat that gun as if it were loaded. Be sure it is never pointed at another person, and the muzzle is always pointed in a safe direction. Hello, I'm Lenny McGill, and welcome to Volume 3 of a three-part series titled High-Power Rifle Competition, Mind Over Matter, being brought to you by the Civilian Marksmanship Program. Coming up in this volume, you'll see in-depth interviews with members of the Army Marksmanship Unit covering sight picture and calling your shots, trigger control, and arc of movement. Then we're out to the range to shoot the 300-yard rapid-fire prone position and the 600-yard slow-fire prone position. The shooting sports require a unique mindset. You've got to be able to control your mind, your body, and a firearm. This same discipline can be used to enhance other areas of your life. Gary Anderson, Director of the Civilian Marksmanship, explains.
The target shooting experience is very much in contrast with the public perception. A very safe experience, a very disciplined experience, a very positive experience. People learn to control themselves. They can't be safe with a firearm without learning to be very disciplined. The self-control that they have to develop is exemplary. When people first hear about target shooting, my plea is don't judge it until you know enough about it to know what happens in the training environment, in the competition environment where these people are participating. And I think they'll find out that if you see what happens to a young person or an adult who goes through something like the Small Arms Firing School, goes through the training that's offered in a local shooting club, that this person becomes far safer around firearms in handling responsibility generally than young people who have never had that training. So people who get the chance to be part of a marksmanship training experience are actually going to be safer, they're going to be more responsible, learn what happens with these people, and I think if you see what happens through that experience, it would be very, very difficult to say that this is anything but a very, very positive experience. I think the primary goal is one that focuses on firearm safety. All of us in the shooting sports know that organized target shooting is very, very safe. We take a great deal of pride in being able to conduct literally thousands and thousands of events and not have any accidents. And we feel that the discipline, the safety procedures, the training that make our target activity so safe are the kind of things that they're lessons that ought to be taught to people who haven't had the advantage of that. So one is spread the firearm safety message as far as possible. My personal goals very much focus on young people, being able to develop adults in the shooting sports so that they can become youth leaders. I'd like to see us reach a day when every young person in the country who is interested in trying the shooting sports, learning how to handle a rifle safely, would at least have that opportunity through some kind of a local program.
For more information, contact the Civilian Marksmanship Program in Port Clinton, Ohio.
I'm Sergeant First Class Rand Vinson with the Army Service Rifle Team, and we're going to talk a little bit about shooting accurately by calling your shot and sight picture, if you will. First of all, let me mention, it's important to note that a lot of times when I've looked at certain people's rifles, you see a front sight that's really thin, there's really not a lot there, and that's actually, some people think that may give them a more precise aiming point, but actually what it does, it causes you not to have a lot to look at. A lot of people aren't aware that we have a lifelong bad habit that we always tend to look at the target. Well, with shooting, all the shooting occurs at the weapon system itself. So we want to concentrate on the top center edge of the front sight while we're shooting. And that's like, for example, if I told you to look at my finger, I'm not talking about looking at the finger. If this was my front sight, I'm talking about looking at the top of my fingernail right there, top center edge. And that's how you get that refined point of aim. But if you have a wider front sight post, you're more likely to look at it.
Yeah, because most people try to file them down and make them tiny.
Sure, and mainly what we do when we file them is we clean up the edges, and again, we tailor it to the individual shooter, and it sets up a relationship between the front post width and the rear sight aperture size. And it's just something that helps them, it looks good to them, whatever. But standard, I use about a 68 thousandths front sight width, and that's pretty wide. As a matter of fact, the stock one's about 70 thousandths, so I just clean the edges up, make the top nice and crisp, and that's what I shoot. And that also helps with your elevation. A lot of people, when they get back to the 600-yard line, they have a very narrow, very thin front sight. They lose a lot of shots, these unexplained corner shots and elevation shots. Well, that's because they don't have enough front sight to look at, really.
Oh, how about that? What about the rear sight? Do you do anything with that, or is that standard? Or
the rear sight aperture, they just relaxed the rules a little bit and allowed people to include hoods, a hooded aperture. And what a hooded aperture does is you're looking through a tunnel, basically, and it helps the rear aperture be more crisp and distinct. But basically, the rear aperture, the size is determined on the individual. Again, young eyes, they can go to smaller aperture sizes. Older guys need bigger apertures to let in more light. So the aperture size is basically just to control the amount of light that comes through the rear sight.
So show us with your diagram, well, just really with the sight picture or the sight alignment right now.
Okay.
And let's talk about that.
Right here we got this high-speed model here, but this is a simulation of what your sight picture would actually look like when you're looking through the rifle sights. You're not really seeing the rear aperture, you're looking through it. And you're not really looking at the target because your eye can only focus on things that are in the same focal plane. And if the target's 200 yards to 600 yards away, obviously you can't look at, in clear focus, the front sight and the target at the same time. And again, this takes us back to where does shooting occur? Well, it all happens at the weapon system, so we're going to look at the front sight. Now, does that mean we never look at the target? Well, in competition shooting, you want to look at the target to verify your target number. That's very important because you don't want to put 10s on other people's targets. It doesn't help you at all. So what you want to do is look at your target number, verify that it's your target, and what I do is I kind of justify the two, making sure of my sight picture, and again, the position is set up to support the sight picture. If I'm going to shoot a 6 o'clock hold, I'm going to have my position set up to where it's going to look something like that, and the front sight is going to rest at 6 o'clock on the target when I'm in my natural respiratory pause and I've got my natural point of aim adjusted.
Let me ask you a question first about the sight alignment, front sight within the rear sight. You know,
Okay.
should it be centered up like you have it here in the diagram?
Okay, there's a book definition that's not actually accurate. The book says align the front sight vertically and horizontally in the rear sight aperture. Well, really you can't do that because it happens naturally. If you're looking through a circle, and that's why we shoot peep sights on the M16, you're looking through a circle aperture. So what happens is whatever you're looking at is going to be centered. So that's why I talk about looking at the top center edge of the front sight, because that's what you want centered in the rear aperture. And if you'll do that, understand that the front sight and the rear sight are already in a relationship to one another. The rifle is fixed. It's a rigid platform. And what you want to do is bring your eye in line with the sights. If you would, you could imagine an imaginary line running from the top center edge of the front sight all the way back through the rear sight aperture. And what you're trying to do is bring your dominant eye in line with that, so that when I rest my head on the stock, I've got good sight alignment.
So you're not slightly below it, you're not slightly on top of it,
Right.
You're right in line with it.
And my head is going to be rested to where it can actually remain there and be consistent. And again, from position to position, I may be closer or farther away to the rear sight aperture, but it won't matter so much because I'm still in that line. I got my eye still in line with the rear aperture looking at the top center edge of the front sight.
And you're still focusing on the front sight.
And still focusing on the front sight before I break that shot.
Okay, so now there's several different types of holds you guys do here. Describe
Yes.
them to me.
Okay, what we've shown here is a 6 o'clock hold, and basically it's holding the front sight at the base of the target.
Of the black.
Of the aiming black, yes. And then you can go to what's called a flat tire, something like this.
And that's where the sight comes
That's where you
into
push the front sight into the black. And basically the target, if you were to look at it, would look like it's a flat tire. It's got a flat line across the bottom of it. And again, before you break the shot, you're still going to look at the front sight. And then there's center mass of the object, and that's basically putting the front sight in the middle of the aiming black. And there's different techniques for this. Center mass will actually help when you're shooting standing. The more unstable the position, you're going to see more movement. When you look through your sights, you'll see more movement. And it's actually helps some people to shoot center mass because it gives them maximum opportunity to hit in the middle aiming black. Other than that, more stable positions, people tend to shoot 6 o'clock or flat tire. And again, it's whatever looks good to the person.
Well, now the theory there, I guess, is that at 600 yards, your front sight is getting so large in relative to the size of the target, in a sense that.
Right. If I were to have a representation of the 600-yard target here, my front sight is as wide as the 6x6 that holds the whole target frame.
Right. So it's very difficult then to do a center mass hit.
That's not as refined point of aim, and I, as a rule, I wouldn't recommend using a 600 at 600 yards a center mass hold. It's more refined to use a nice refined aiming point like a flat tire or 6 o'clock. And again, it depends on the person, but I would recommend the use of a 6 o'clock or a flat tire hold.
So when you sight in, you're going to be using that 6 o'clock
Yes.
hold.
And you have to make sure you're consistent with what you do. If you zero the weapon, center mass for standing, for example, then that's what you want to shoot all the time. And if you got to make sure it's kind of difficult sometimes to switch back and forth, but if you keep track of it, you keep a good data book, and you're consistent with what you do, it won't be a problem. But make sure that you build your position to where that front sight is going to rest naturally on that desired point of aim.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So now this is really the sight picture you see, and this is how when. Talk to us a little bit about arc of movement while we're looking at this target. What do you see at, say, 200 yards? What do you see at 300 yards? What do you see at 600 yards?
With standing that we shoot at 200 yards, the target, the actual front sight moves around the target in almost a figure-8 pattern. You get little left and right movement and a little bit of up and down movement, and it'll actually depend on the stability of your position, and if there's a lot of wind out there, it has a tendency to magnify that.
What kind of movement do you see? Can you represent that there a little bit?
Here. The front sight will move around like this. And with the M16, it tends to look a little more rapid, the movement, than with an M14. But basically in sitting position, in the prone position, you won't see much movement at all.
Uh-huh. Now, when you go to break your shot, say at the standing position, and you have that movement, is there a time when you want to break it, when it's moving into the black or moving out of the black, or do you play that, or do you have a rule for yourself? Or?
Yeah, there's a couple different techniques. There's one that some people use called command detonation, and it's like you take the shot, but that's used mainly in like a high wind condition when you really have no stability at all. I mean, it's amazing. For example, the first time I shot a national trophy team match, the winds were howling, and I was moving 10 target frames either way in my position, standing there.
Wow!
And I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to do this? Well, you have to approach it with a different technique. It's almost as if you take the shot. Usually, though, you want to settle in, accept your movement, and apply initial pressure. And as you come into your good hold, as it comes in and begins to settle, then you break the shot. And that's usually done through proper repetition. You teach yourself that you're breaking the shot smooth whenever it settles in. You want to have enough initial pressure, because if you break the shot when it's going out, you'll be what we call behind the trigger. In other words, you're past your optimum hold. It's not really what you wanted to see, and it may not be a good quality shot. But the key thing here is to remember you have to call your shot. And what calling the shot is determining where the front sight was in relation to my desired point of aim when it went off.
Well, that's a pretty hard thing to do when you're seeing that picture, I think. I mean, show me or describe to me now, if you take the shot, don't your sights jump off, and what do you see? How can you call it with all that movement?
All right. When you take a shot, when the moment of truth, when the rifle fires, wherever that front sight is, that's where the shot should be if you're on call and if your zero is true. The only problem you may have is that you may close your eyes. That's a natural tendency for people to do. So you have to practice what's called follow-through. And what follow-through is just continuing to apply the two principles we talked about before, sight alignment, trigger control. In other words, I'm looking at that front sight, top center edge, all the way through the recoil of the weapon and holding the trigger to the rear, basically finishing the shot, completing the shot. And when I do that, and I keep my eye open, I'll be able to tell where that front sight is when the rifle fires.
Now, when you shoot, obviously you're a right-handed shooter, so do you see a consistent arc of movement on recoil, and are you aware of that? Are you observing that, and do you expect the gun to settle back in the same spot?
Okay.
Can you demonstrate that with the model here at all?
With depending on the position, when you get in position, sometimes the target, you'll actually approach the target from the 12 o'clock or the 6 o'clock. I'll actually, as I breathe up and down, the front sight will move up and down on the target face. Mm-hmm. And when I come to a natural respiratory pause, it'll be on my desired point of aim. When it recoils, what I'll see in standing usually is, sometimes it's something a little different every time. You'll see the rifle jump, but where it was when it went off is basically where the shot should be. Like I called it a little bit on the right, a little bit on the left, or whatever. Now, in sitting in prone, when I set up my position is set up in a manner that allows the front sight to come back to my desired point of aim right after recoil. Position is set up to manage recoil, and it shouldn't break down during the string. Mm-hmm. Slow fire, in a sense, is different in that it only has to produce one good shot right now. Even so, the position remains consistent. But rapid fire, you have to produce 10 shots in a string, and your position has to be built to where it can manage that recoil.
How would one practice calling your shots? How do you get to the point where you can do it? And if you're done with that diagram, you can put it down. How do you get to the point where you can call your shots? Because based upon the diagram, you really don't have a point within the black, any one point where you could say, well, it hit there. You're kind of guesstimating. It looks like just based upon how much where the sight was in relation to the black.
Right. When you become real critical about what you do, and shooting is all a matter of being particular and critical about every little thing you do, when you really look at that front sight, when you really look at it, you'll know through experience exactly where it's at. I mean, we've got guys that call shots, oh, that's an exit 3, and you're talking 3 inches in an unsupported position, which is standing at 200 yards, and there it is, exit 3. I mean, you can get to where if you're paying attention to your front sight, you can be very accurate on your calls. And when I first learned how to do it is I was shooting a pistol. And a guy told me if I wanted to shoot better, I need to keep my eye open. And I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, I got my eye open, I'm shooting. He says, no, when the moment of truth occurs, when you break the shot, you're closing your eye, and it's natural to do that.
With the bang and all
right,
the other
with
stuff.
everything that's going on, he says, have you ever seen the brass ejecting out of your pistol? I said, no, sir, I haven't. So he says, well, think about that this time and concentrate on it. And that next time, I looked at it, and the first shot I took, I thought I broke the pistol. I saw the muzzle flash, I saw the slide come back, the brass go out, and I was like, whoa. And so that was a big moment for me in my shooting. It got better after that, because I even started noticing it with the M16 rifle after that. You'll notice a flash cross your line of sight and go off the brass deflector as the brass is being ejected out of the rifle, and that's where you know your eye is open, and you know you're doing it.
So you really want to concentrate on keeping the eye open
through the whole process.
Moment of truth, yeah.
Right.
And then, of course, you've got to take that snapshot of the image of where the sight was in relation to the black circle, because really that's what you can't see the rings at these distances, so you are estimating, but you become good at your estimations based upon practice, I guess.
Right. Basically, the target's going to be a fuzzy dot, again, because it's on a different focal plane. But in relation to what that fuzzy dot looks like when the rifle fires and my front sight is nice and clear, you can call your shots very accurately if you're particular about what you're doing.
Right. So obviously, if the sight, again, we can look at this this diagram, pull that up. If that post is just slightly to the right of or the left, say.
For example, let's say it's here.
Right.
I pretty much know that I've shot a 9 at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And you can call that very accurately.
Right.
And again, it depends on when you break the shot. When you break the shot as it comes in, that's the ideal thing, because your first hold is your best hold. Your first good look at it is the best look you'll have at it. And that's why you have to work at getting a good established position, because the longer you can make a good hold, the more opportunity you have to take a shot. So that's why standing is a little difficult, because the window of opportunity is very small. But if you practice good trigger control and you really concentrate on what you're doing, you can actually have great success even in shooting standing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. And then as far as arc of movement, there's really not a lot of arc of movement here in this rifle game for guys at your level. Is that correct?
That's correct. In sitting in prone position, I would say most of the guys don't see really any movement. Maybe you'll see a pulse speed in sitting. But other than that, it looks rock solid at 600 yards. Granted, there's still movement, but it's not that visible because the position is so solid. Standing is a little different. You're going to see the movement more pronounced in standing.
Mm-hmm. And are there any practice techniques that you can suggest to people? Because obviously you had just mentioned that the real turning point in your career was, wow.
Sure, realizing that I need to keep my eye open.
Yeah.
Well, there's many things. You can actually shoot pistol to get better shooting rifle, because we have a saying here that all shooting is the same. It's not how you shoot it. I mean, it's not what you shoot it from, the position you use, in other words. That's just a platform. And it's not necessarily what you use, because those are just tools. It's basically shooting is all the same. So whether I'm shooting a rifle in the prone or shooting a pistol standing, when I take away the standing and the prone and the pistol and the rifle, I still got shooting. So what all shooting is good sight alignment, trigger control. And with a pistol, a less rigid system. I can point that wherever I wanted to. So if I get really good with a pistol, then my rifle shooting will be that much better, because I'm concentrating those two principles. However, the variables that come in with rifle shooting is that you shoot it from various positions. You have to master standing, sitting, prone, rapid, and slow. And then we're also out in the elements, and you get far away. 600 yards is a pretty significant distance from the target, and you could literally miss the whole 6x6 if you didn't adjust for the wind. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things you have to master to shoot rifle well.
Now, you mentioned just before sitting over here, you said that there's all these little things. It's the meticulous person is the person who's going to be successful in this sport.
Right. A person who pays attention to detail and is very meticulous and careful about what they do is going to be successful. One way you can cause yourself to be that way is to get a system. Not only do you have a system of how you do things, how you conduct business on the firing line, I do this, then my data book, my loading of my magazines, I'll have a system for all these things. Not only do you do that, but you get a mental game, because I would say that a large portion of the shooting game is mental. You have to be able to run a mental program and think about what you're doing, because it's the person that makes the least mistakes that wins the rifle match. It's not that necessarily talent that separates all of them, because you'll have a large number of talented people out there. It's that person who made the least mistakes because he's got a good system.
Mm-hmm. Do you, as a team, how do you prepare mentally? Do you of course, you have a plan, you have a system. Do you visualize? Do you do anything else?
As a unit, our unit's been very good about that. They've provided us with a lot of good resources. We've had several different people come here and talk to us about mental programs, one of them being Olympic gold medalist Lanny Basham. He has a mental management program, and he's come and he's pitched that to us, and people have implemented that into their system. Also, we've had other sports psychologists and things like that have been available, and some people just make their time available to us because they like shooting and they like shooters. But it's very important to have a good mental game. Very important.
Good. Okay. And let me ask you one other question. We talked about calling your shot and talked about sight picture and all that. The trigger, the way you guys are approaching the trigger. In the early days of my life of shooting, it's always, let the trigger surprise you.
Okay.
And don't try to make the shot. Now, you guys, I've heard several people say, well, I want to know when the shot's going to go off, and I want to be aggressive with the trigger, and I want to, where are you at with that?
I agree with the latter. A lot of times, some things carry over from other disciplines, other techniques, and I would say if I were shooting another discipline, it might surprise me when it goes off, because I may have a trigger that doesn't really weigh anything at all. But in service rifle shooting, and again, I'll use the standing position for example, you almost have to determine when the shot's going to fire. And I'm not saying that, I'll say this, shooting is a conscious act. It's a deliberate act. You deliberately are standing there, you deliberately build a position, you deliberately load the rifle, and you deliberately put your finger on the trigger. Now, if you do all these things that are deliberate in a proper manner, you can cause them to occur to a high degree of accuracy. And if you're very particular about what you do and have good initial pressure on the trigger, you can break those shots just about when you want to. And that, again, that's when you get that first good look at it, when your front sight's coming in and everything looks good, have enough initial pressure to where that thing just break. And that's just usually a reaction to seeing that good sight alignment, that good sight picture.
And so you want to be somewhat deliberate.
Sure.
How does that change from 200, 300 to 600?
You're probably a little more aggressive in standing, I would say. And that, again, depends on weather, maybe more so aggressive if it's windy. 600-yard line, I think people take a little more time setting the shot up because, in your mind you're thinking, hey, I'm 600 yards away, when really the distance doesn't matter, except that I'm consistent in what I do and I keep track of the wind. I think that in rapid fires, people are a little more aggressive. I shoot an aggressive trigger. That's just me. That's a technique. I would say that the main thing, it has to be smooth, so you don't disturb your sight alignment and create an angular error when you're pointing.
And that's something you can practice through dry fire, right?
That's right. Matter of fact, that's a good technique. A lot of people, they'll be very quick to want to live fire. They're very quick to want to go to the range, when I would say that most of your training occurs prior to going to the range. Going to the range is actual application of what you do or do not know, or what you can and cannot do. So before you go to the range, I would say that everything has to be set. And I would start off in a crawl, walk, run phase. To start off with, understand what I'm trying to accomplish. Spend a lot of time building a program, a system, and really spend a lot of time doing position work, because I want to be able to really build some solid positions before I start live firing. Because if I have a weak position, the live firing is just going to it's not going to go as well as I would like. So if I get all those things out of the way at first, I develop a system, I have good positions. When I go out there and start live firing, now I'm just fine-tuning. Because when I go to a match, basically that's application. I'm applying what I know or don't know.
Calling your shots is the master skill of all shooting. It's not really difficult once you know what you're looking for. And because you're watching this program, you've got a big head start. So next time you're at the range, pay close attention to that front sight, and you'll be amazed with your newfound abilities. Coming up, we're going to meet with Sergeant First Class Kyle Ward as he takes us through the 300-yard rapid-fire prone position. 10 shots in 70 seconds.
I'm Sergeant Ward from the United States Army Marksmanship Unit. I'll be discussing the third stage of fire, which is 300 rapid fire prone. Okay, before I'm called to the line, before my relay is called to the line, I like to do a few things to my equipment before we get started. Okay, I've already loaded my magazines. I've put sight black on the sights of my rifle, and I've already put on my zero.
Do you typically sight black at every stage?
Every stage, I like to, because going from yard line to yard line, it gets wiped off sometimes.
Okay. All right. So almost every position, huh?
About every position I put it on.
Okay. Then what do you do once you get all your stuff together? Do you refer to any notes? Do you think about anything else?
Sometimes I review previous performances at the 300-yard line, as I do at every stage, just to see if there's anything that has changed in my position. So I review notes and pretty much just wait until I'm called to the line. Once they call my relay to the line, I'll bring my equipment up to the line, ensuring that I do not handle my rifle, because not allowed to do that yet. Okay? But you can go ahead and don your shooting equipment. So first thing is I'll put my jacket on and get it out of the way. For me, I like to buckle the top two straps. The reason I do this is the top strap is going to provide some support and keep this pad from moving around on my shoulder. The second buckle just keeps the jacket from flaring out, keeps it out of my way. As you can see here, I have it done very loosely, so I'm still able to breathe. Okay, next I'm going to find a nice piece of ground to lay my mat out on.
And what are you looking for? Just something flat?
Something flat, and where my elbows will be fairly level with one another.
Oh, so you don't want one kind of...
Correct. That tends to, in a rapid fire string, it tends to make you shift around throughout the string.
Uh-huh.
Some inconsistencies there. So I've placed my mat out. Next thing, I'm going to bring my scope up. As you can see here, my mat has a flap off to the front, so I'm going to ensure that the legs to my scope stand pin that down so it doesn't blow back in my face. If you were in a condition that a headwind was coming, keep it off your face.
That would be uncomfortable.
It would. All right. And next I'll just lay my rifle down there and get into my stool here.
What kind of stuff are you pulling out of the cable?
Okay. I've got my sweat towel here just to wipe my face on a hot day, and I have my shooting mitt that I'm not going to put on yet. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay down on the mat as if I were about to shoot. Right now I'm making sure that my non-firing elbow, I have a comfortable place to put it. It's not in a hole. Some people, and this is an option, some people like to shoot just off of the front of their mat, where you're actually off of the rubber piece here. For me, personally, I like to just put my elbow just on the forward edge of the mat. That's so. Okay, next, I'm going to ensure that I have this zipper zipped up. Prone is the only position that I have this zipped up. It just provides a little additional support for me. Okay. They've told us our preparation period has started. All my equipment is ready. So I'm going to go ahead and get the sling on my arm. Just as in sitting, I'm going to give the sling a quarter turn to the outside, make a hole where I can get my arm through. Okay, and I'm gonna put it high up on my arm between my deltoid and my bicep, and slightly towards the back of my arm. Basically what I'm trying to do is when the sling is tight, I'm trying to keep it off the front of my bicep.
And that's because you get, what, some pulse beat or so?
Yes,
or?
you definitely get a pulse. I like to have the sling right here off the side of my bicep. If it were over here, once I got into position and it tightened up, it would definitely create a pulse.
So you're going to see that as the sights start to thump.
Especially on a hot day.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's on the back of my arm, and now I'm going to don my shooting mitt. Okay, now I'm ready to dry fire.
Tell me about how you're putting your hand in there and all that.
Okay. We put a quarter turn to the outside of the sling so it creates this unevenness here, and I'm going to come from the outside in so the sling will be flat against the back of my hand when I actually get into position. Mm-hmm. Okay, again, finding that comfortable place where I found earlier for my non-firing elbow. I'm going to place it there. I'm going to grab the rifle by the buttstock, and I'm going to place it into my shoulder, both looking and feeling that it is in the correct place for me, so I can keep my head straight up and down behind the rifle, create that optimum head position for good sight alignment.
Did you hear that? It's one of those recurring statements we've heard throughout this series. Keeping your head straight up and down will help you with your sight alignment. If your head is crooked or canted too much, it's harder for your brain to see the alignment of the sights. I hope you also paid a lot of attention to how deep in he put the butt of the rifle into his chest. It's not really on his shoulder, but it's almost lined up with the center of his chest. This enables him to get over the rifle's sights and to center the rifle up with his body, allowing a more natural point of aim, which will take us to our next segment, the actual prone position itself.
I'm straight back on the mat in the prone position. You want to try and be behind the rifle as much as possible. This is to absorb recoil. If you were to be out to the side of the rifle like so, throughout your string, you'll find, a lot of people will find that they begin to work off to the right side. So I like to stay right behind the rifle to absorb as much recoil as possible.
So especially, I guess, in that rapid fire where you really don't have a lot of time to adjust your position, you're boom, 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 kind of sliding yourself over.
Correct. Okay, so again, I grab the rifle by the buttstock. I'm looking and feeling to ensure that it's in the proper place in my shoulder, and then I'll roll on over to the rifle. Now, you can see that I have my right leg drawn up slightly, and what that does is it keeps my diaphragm off the ground. It helps me to breathe.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't restrict any breathing.
So I guess if your diaphragm was on the ground too, you would maybe be, again, getting some breathing pattern into your sight picture.
It's quite possible. Okay?
Okay, now this left leg, you've got the toe pointing in. Any particular reason there, or is that just the way it is?
That's just the way it is for me. You'll see some people that put it any old way. I would say, though, to not be up on your toes, because as you can move your feet like this, you're also moving the rifle when you're in position.
Uh-huh.
So I just like to isolate any movement or any possible movement. Okay, I've constructed a good position here. One thing I'm going to do while we're still in prep time is I'm going to adjust my scope. One last time. I adjust everything one last time before shooting starts, just to make sure that I have an ergonomic little workstation set up here where I can reach everything. My scope is right here at eye level, so all I have to do is turn my head and I can check the wind, check the mirage. Okay.
So that's so you don't have to move out of your position.
Correct. All right, I'm now inserting a magazine, an empty magazine, into the rifle, and I'm going to begin dry firing.
Now, one thing I noticed is that the difference between this and, say, the standing position is that you're really anchoring the top part of the butt into your shoulder, versus in the standing position, he barely put the bottom part into his shoulder.
Correct. A good rule of thumb is the higher you are off the ground, the higher the buttstock will be in the shoulder. Okay, that's a good rule of thumb. So in the sitting position, you can see that the buttstock is a little further down on the shoulder, and in the prone, it's even further down into your shoulder, and that's so you can lay on the top of the rifle.
Yeah, it really seems like you're on top of it is a good term.
You are.
So a lot of face contact here, huh?
Very much. You need to have as much head pressure as possible. You should be able to rest the full weight of your head on the stock of the rifle. Okay, my firing hand, I have a firm grip on the pistol grip. My finger is naturally resting on the trigger. Okay, it's not the tip of my finger necessarily, it's just wherever it's comfortable for me.
Okay, how about natural point aim here? Are you looking for that right now?
Yes, I am. Okay, right now I see that I'm pointed off to the left side of my target. So to adjust my natural point of aim in this position, all I'm going to do is I'm going to get into position and I'm going to shift my belt buckle in the opposite direction of the way I need to go. So I need to move to the right without moving my non-firing elbow, because that's the anchor point for this position. I'm just going to pivot on it and I'm going to move my belt buckle to the left. Okay, now I'm on target.
Okay, so that's just by moving the body more so than twisting the rifle around.
Right, just think of it in terms of your belt buckle. You move your belt buckle to the right or left, it will move the rifle either right or left. If you move your belt buckle forward, it's going to depress your muzzle, and if you move it to the rear, it will elevate the muzzle of the rifle.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got a good position and I've dry fired. What I like to do at this time is I just like to watch the wind downrange and see what conditions I may be shooting in the upcoming string of fire.
So at 300 yards, does the wind start to play, come into play here?
It plays a huge role at 300 yards.
Does it really?
It sure does.
Yeah, and especially, I guess, with a .223 round?
Exactly. It's very challenging.
Okay, and so now what are you trying to see when you look in the scope for the wind and or the flags?
Okay, well, I'm looking at the flags. From the flags, I'm determining some velocity by just how much the flags are standing up or away from the flagpoles. With the Mirage, I'm mainly just checking the direction. Mm-hmm. Direction and speed with the Mirage. And right now, it's not doing a whole lot downrange. It's pretty much at a boil. And as you can see, the flags are kind of limp right now.
Yeah. Is there a general rule of thumb on those flags as far as how high they stand, how fast the wind is going?
Well, they say that there are. They say that if you divide the angle of the flag, that it creates the bottom of the flag in relationship with the flagpole, and divide by 4, you come up with a wind velocity that way. But I'll tell you that all flags are different. Some are cotton, some are nylon.
Right.
You know, when they're
some
wet.
Some are old, some are new.
Right. So that's not the best method. The best method is just to look around and observe your surroundings. Look at the trees, see how much they're moving around. And the Mirage, if the Mirage really looks like it's moving fast across the range, then you can bet that the wind is definitely strong enough to blow you around.
And how would you start to play that wind? What would you do? Would you take some sighter shots first, or would you do you look at your shots in between, or you don't really have time in the rapid fire, do you?
No. After they give us the go ahead to shoot our sighters, I'll make my best guess on what I think the wind's worth. I'll put that on the sights, and I'll fire my first shot. Once the target comes up, I'll again look in the scope, check the mirage, and I'll move my sights in whatever manner needed to get me into the middle of the target, okay? Then once I'm there, I'm just watching the condition to make sure there's not a drastic change. Once they have it stand and we begin the rapid fire string, I'll not look at the target again until I perform a mag change in the middle of the string.
Okay. All right, so now that you're kind of set up, let's do some sighters and see what happens.
Okay.
Before we actually begin this course of fire, I thought you should hear the range commands as they are announced at an actual competition. And from what better place than the national matches at Camp Perry, Ohio, where these competitions have been held since the 1920s.
That's in case I drop one, so I don't have to pick it up.
Your preparation period has ended. This string of fire will be 10 rounds, fired in 10 minutes. With 1 round, load. Is the line ready? The line is ready. Your time will begin, and you may fire when your targets appear. Ceasefire! Time has expired.
Well, like I said, the important thing is to focus on bad shots and already fired.
No additional time on the right. Has additional time been authorized on the left? Yes. Those targets authorized additional time. Your time will begin when all targets appear. Other competitors, clear your rifles and insert open response indicators.
One, I'm trying to check my zero. I want to ensure that my zero is correct. And two, I want to see what the wind's doing. I want to see what it's worth and make sure that I've put a good guess on the rifle. Okay, so our 3-minute preparation period is ended. I'm going to take one of my sighters out here. Okay, one last time, I'm going to check the wind and make any last sight corrections I need to make. I'm going to get onto the rifle here, and I'm not going to dress up. I'm not going to try and make this look beautiful. I'm going to make it look just like it would in a rapid fire string. You don't want to lay on the rifle as if you're shooting slow fire. You want to do it just like rapid fire.
Oh, that's very smart.
Okay, I made a mental note of where I think the shot should be. Okay, my target's being scored right now, and I'm watching the wind. I want to see if it's going to change. Okay, the target's come up. I'm a little high, so I'm going to come down. Okay, you have 2 minutes to shoot 2 sighters. It's my recommendation that you don't shoot them as fast as possible. Take some time and watch what the conditions are doing. Utilize your entire 2 minutes.
So maybe shoot one at the beginning, shoot one towards the end or so?
Correct, that's what I like to do.
And that way it gives you a chance to kind of see if they're going to change or if there's a pattern to things. Or
Correct.
I mean, sometimes wind comes in gusts, right?
Right. So that's one thing you definitely want to watch for, and that's why I say utilize your entire 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
It looks like you follow through after the shot as well.
Yes, you follow through. Watch where your sights end up. Make sure they come back in the same place, right on target. Okay, again, I'm watching the wind while my target's being scored. At this time, something else I'd like to point out that I didn't earlier. When I got into position, one key thing to shooting the prone position is having your non-firing arm as much underneath the rifle as possible. Okay, I'm actually shooting on the outside of my elbow. Therefore, I have the rifle right over the top of my non-firing arm.
So you're kind of laying that arm down.
Correct. I have it laid over on its side. My elbow's actually over here, and everything else is kind of laid back. It isolates all of those muscles in your arm. Okay, our 2-minute sighter period is over, and we're ready to shoot a string of rapid fire.
Okay, and now the hard part about this is that you don't start from the prone position.
Correct. Before I stand up, I'm going to take my 8-round magazine, and I'm going to place it right here next to my non-firing elbow. I do that because I know where it's at, so I can just reach down without having to look around, and it's right there. Also, I'm marking my position. I know right where to put my elbow when I get back down.
Uh-huh.
All right, so the next command you'll hear should be shooter stand. Okay, I'm going to stand up. I'm keeping my right foot forward of my left, just as if I were laying in position. I had this leg drawn up to keep my diaphragm off the ground. I'm just going to leave it just like that.
So you're looking just to have as little motion as possible when you go down.
Correct. Okay. The next command you'll hear should be load. Okay, insert a magazine of 2 rounds. Leave the bolt to the rear. Weapons on safe. Okay. They'll ask if you're ready on the right, ready on the left, and all ready on the firing line. At that time, you should be looking downrange, waiting for the targets to appear.
And
okay.
The targets are the signal to begin, right?
Yes, it is.
Now,
and not just your target, but once any target on the range starts to move up into the air, you can go ahead and get into position.
All right, and of course they're human operated, so they could be a little different. One could come up on the right faster than one, and your target may not come up until last.
Absolutely.
So why wait, huh?
Why wait?
Now, what's the time limit here? What do you got to do?
Okay, this is going to be 10 rounds fired in a time limit of 70 seconds with a magazine change.
Okay, and what are you trying to do when you get down in position right here? What's your objective?
Okay, the first thing I do once I see the targets are coming up, I want to construct the same position I had when I shot my sighters. It's not a race, therefore I'm going to take as much time necessary to recreate that position, that good prone position that I built earlier.
Do you feel you have enough time? Is 70 seconds a long time, or are you ever rushed?
No, it's more than enough time to shoot 10 shots with a magazine change. And also, if you take the time in the beginning stages to set up your good position, that will aid you in shooting faster, actually.
Okay, and
You'll
why
recover,
so? Because the gun comes right back to where it's supposed to?
You will recover much more quickly.
Ah, okay, so if you eat up 3 or 4 more seconds getting in the right position,
you'll make them up later.
All right.
Okay, the targets are coming up. I'm going to drop to my knees. I'm going to put that elbow in the exact same spot that it was earlier. Take the rifle off of safe and close the bolt. Okay, I'm looking in my scope to make sure that nothing has changed, and it hasn't. Put the rifle into my shoulder. I'm checking my natural point of aim real quickly, very quickly. Load my magazine of 8 rounds. Placing the weapon or the rifle back on safe. Insert the safety flag. And I'm just going to stand by right now until the line is made safe. And I'm going to wait for my target to appear so it can be scored.
Just in case you were wondering, Sergeant Ward was able to shoot that entire 10-round string of fire in just under 70 seconds, even though he talked us through it. Now, let's analyze that string of fire. Now, I noticed a couple things. One, it seems that you had a rhythmic breathing between shots. You would shoot, breathe, shoot. I saw your lungs were moving, or your rib cage was moving kind of with a cadence.
Yes. We don't teach breathing as a fundamental of marksmanship. It's actually something that just comes naturally to everybody. You've been doing it since you were born. But you need to breathe between every shot. Failure to do so will create fatigue, and you'll actually start seeing things, believe it or not.
So you breathe in between every shot, just kind of rhythmically, and your shots almost, like I said, seem to have a cadence to it. And is that through practice where you shoot and you're back on target and shoot and back on? Tell me more about that.
Well, it's kind of a built-in rhythm, I guess. Everybody has a natural respiratory pause between each breath, and so obviously you want to shoot in that natural respiratory pause. So just don't really think about breathing. Just do it as you would naturally, and when you're not breathing, squeeze the trigger.
Okay. One other thing I noticed too is that your forward arm, or forward hand, you're not really holding the gun as much as just cradling it.
Correct. What I'm doing, and if you can get into a good prone position, you will not have to hold the rifle with your non-firing hand. You're making the sling do all of the work for you. And actually, I'm not holding the rifle with this hand, and I could take this hand out of the picture also, and it'll stay right in my position.
So that's the sling in your shoulder, right?
That's the sling in my shoulder. And then when you actually get into position as if you were going to shoot, your head kind of acts as a third hand because you're resting the full weight of your head onto the stock, and that does nothing but add stability to your position.
Now, we talked about at the prone position, really trying to keep the head level and the eyes level. Are you trying to do the same thing here at this position, keeping your eyes level? You're not really tilting your head too much, are you?
No, that is key in all positions, to keep your head upright and straight behind the sights for optimum sight picture. Sight alignment.
So you're not canting the rifle at all?
Not at all.
You're bringing your head and the rifle up to your head, I guess.
Yes, I am. And also, I'm bringing it very close into my chest. It's not so much out here on my shoulder as it is more on my pectoral muscle. I bring the rifle in very, very close to my face.
And then locking down that arm kind of locks it in there, huh?
Sure does.
Good. Now, at this position, is this a difficult position, or is this an easy one compared to the rest of them?
Well, prone position's everyone's favorite position because it is the most stable position. I think, personally, for me, it is much easier than, say, standing is. But like I said, being the most stable position, it probably is one of the easier positions to shoot.
Mm-hmm. And it all comes right back to your platform, though, that you're building, your position that you're building, right?
Correct. Key thing in the prone position, as in any other position, is bone support, okay, which we've created. We have our elbow right here on the ground, and we have, like I said, you want to keep your elbow underneath the rifle. If you were to have your rifle out, or your non-firing arm out to the side, like so, okay, you've now introduced muscle tension into the position because you're actually holding the rifle up with your arm. But if you get the rifle over onto the top of your arm, it's all bones and the sling that's doing the work for you.
And you're comfortable there. I mean, you're not straining yourself at all, are you?
I could lay here for hours in this position. Really could.
And I guess that's important for people to practice and find that comfort zone.
It is very important, especially comes more into play even in the slow fire prone position, where you're actually there for 20 minutes sometimes.
Now that you shot the rounds, you got another string to do, right? You do 2 strings?
Correct.
What do you do between strings? Do you record these at all, or how do you go about this business?
Okay. Again, while I'm waiting for my target to be scored, I'm watching the mirage, and it's going to tell me 2 things. One, it's going to tell me what was going on downrange while I was shooting the latter part of my string when I couldn't look into the scope, and it's telling me what's going on or any changes that may be coming up. So I'm looking downrange, waiting for my target to come up, and I'm just watching the mirage. Okay, once my target has been scored and is put up into the air, I'll plot all 10 shots into my scorebook. I'll make any corrections on the rifle that need to be made to shoot the next string. Like I said, in the prep time, I've already loaded my magazines, so I'll place my 8-round magazine right here, and I'll have my 2-round magazine handy until it's time to stand up again. And really all I'm going to do until they tell us to stand is I'm going to look in my scope and read the wind.
Excellent. And then once you get ready to shoot the next string, it's the same thing all over again.
Same thing.
Your objective, of course, is to try to be consistent, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shoot small shot groups. That's the goal. That if you can shoot a tight shot group, you can move it anywhere you need to onto the target. So if you're not necessarily in the 10 ring, but you're shooting tight groups, all you have to do is adjust your sights to the middle.
In this next segment, we'll talk with Sergeant Chris Hatcher as he discusses trigger control and arc of movement.
You have to know when to break the shot. You better break the shot when you want it to go. And if it surprises you, your front sight could be not even near the black, and therefore you're not going to shoot any good shots like that if it's going to completely surprise you. Because old school thought is you get within a hold, and while you're in that hold, then you go ahead and start squeezing the trigger. And then it goes off somewhere in that hold, and then just wherever it goes off, then that's where your shot went. But that's not a real good idea to do that, because what you want to do is you want that hold is so big that you can't afford that shot breaking it when it's on the outside or because it depends on how big it is. For me, I don't want it to break because on the widest part it's a 9 or maybe an 8 even. And for a new shooter, that new shooter, it's going to be like a 6 or a 5 or something like that, and you can't afford to do that. So you have to take charge of that trigger. You have to take charge of your shooting and actually shoot the shot when and where you want to do. And then you just have to learn, okay, trial by error, then you just keep on going and you say, okay, well, I need to break it when it's right here and kind of get into the rhythm. And then pretty soon your eye starts to see what you want, how the front sight, where you want it to break, and then your trigger finger learns, and you train your trigger finger. You say like a kind of a command word. At first, you're going to think like I'm really jerking this trigger pretty hard, but then what you're doing is you're really training it, and then pretty soon you get into it, and your trigger finger does all the work for you. Then pretty soon you can get away from that command word of like now or something like that. You can say now, shoot. Some one-syllable word that you can say fairly fast in your mind. So as the front sight is moving onto the target where you want it to break, then you go ahead and you say now, and you get on the trigger. And then pretty soon, the key word that we use for trigger control is smooth. If you're smooth with the trigger, and as long as you're pulling the trigger straight to the rear, you're not going to disturb the sight alignment or anything in the position, and you can pull that trigger straight to the rear pretty hard and not affect anything with the sights.
That's probably the thing they really have to practice on, is
right.
Being able to not to disassociate that trigger finger with the rest of the hand, because
exactly.
Involuntarily when you move that one, you want to move the rest of the hand.
Right. So that's with like how much grip do you have on the pistol grip? Well, you want a firm, a firm grip on the pistol grip, because kind of naturally when you grab a hold of something, like when I grab a hold of my fingers here with my firing hand, with these fingers and my thumb, and this is my trigger finger up here. When I squeeze, the harder I squeeze, the more my trigger finger wants to follow through. All your fingers want to do kind of the same thing at the same pace. So what you want to do is, if you have a relaxed kind of a grip, when you pull this, you see I kind of move in this, but these are kind of moving too. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a whole hand kind of thing. But if I have a good firm grip, I don't have to squeeze the pistol grip off of the rifle. But if I have a firm grip, like a firm handshake, then this one already wants to come back. So what you're doing is with the trigger, is you get on the trigger and you're actually holding your trigger finger back from pulling all the way through. And then when you say now, it wants to come back anyway. Mm-hmm. So it makes it that much easier to pull the trigger when you do something like that. And plus, when you say now and get aggressive on the trigger, your rest of your fingers and your thumb is it's not going to move, because it already has pressure,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It already has pressure on the pistol grip, so it's not going to move. The only thing moving is your trigger finger at that point. So that's a really important part, and you can learn that during dry firing. The more you dry fire, is you learn how much pressure you can put on there, and then you're just pulling the trigger. And then you learn, okay, well, I have to have a little bit more, or I can have a little bit less and still pull the trigger. But it's straight to the rear. Mm-hmm. And as your front sight is moving around in your wobble area, depends on how big or small your wobble area is, and then you just decide, okay, I want the shot to break now. You're really in command of this thing. Take control of your shooting. Don't let the gun surprise you. A surprise shot's going to be a real wide one, and you're not going to have any success. You're not going to shoot good groups when everything is surprising you. When you take charge and you say now, and you're pulling that trigger, then you're going to come up with some sort of a group.
We had talked about shooting as the sight comes in versus going out.
Right.
Just demonstrate that there with that that high-tech mock-up we've got going here.
Okay, sure. Okay, and here we are, and like we'll kind of go through like I shoot standing here. Is I have the front sight in the perfect world, I'd have my front sight something like this here. Okay, and center mass. When I say center mass, it can be a little bit off in kind of any direction here, and it's still center mass. Okay, another thing to keep in mind with the rifle shooting, yeah, we're going for X's, but the thing is it's not really a pinpoint kind of a thing. If I'm holding anywhere right around here where I'm moving it right now, it's still an X anywhere in there. Anywhere in here. I mean, I could break it at any time and it's still going to be an X. Mm-hmm. Okay, moving a little bit bigger, now anywhere I break it in here, it's still going to be a 10. Okay, so you can see you can have a fair amount of movement in here, and you can break it pretty much a lot of places in the black and still hang a 10 in there. Mm-hmm. Okay, now somewhere along in here, now you see it's a little bit bigger, and I'm going all the way around probably the middle of the 9 ring. Okay, if I break it somewhere in there, it's going to be a 9. Okay, so we see what we need to do is, as we're shooting, and this goes for every position, but especially offhand, is learn how big the 10 ring is. Okay, learn how much. Okay, here's the perfect sight picture, something like this. Okay, learn how high can I go before I shoot a 9. Mm-hmm. How big? What's the limit of the 10 ring? And learn up high and down low and to the right and to the left. How big is that 10 ring? Where can that front sight be, and I still can shoot a 10? Because that's how I shoot offhand. I don't shoot X's. I just shoot 10s, and what I try to do is shoot good solid 10, something like this. Okay, good solid 10. Well, a lot of people would say, well, you're shooting for X's when you're doing that. No, I'm not thinking that. Okay, I'm thinking shoot a good solid 10. So I break it a little bit high. That's fine with me. That's a high 10. I'd rather have a 10 on my scorecard than something else, right? Mm-hmm. I'd rather have 20 10s. That's a 200 with 0. That's just fine. That wins most every match that I walk into. Okay, so I know how big that 10 ring is. If you're just a beginner shooter, don't worry about how big the 10 ring is. Hit the black. try to hit the black all 20 times. If you hit the black all 20 times, the worst you can shoot is a 180. And probably that 10 ring takes up a lot of the black. So you'll probably shoot a few 10s in there. Guess what? You're shooting a 185, maybe a 190 at that point, which is a pretty decent score. So you need to learn how, to take what level you're at and learn how big each ring is. Don't learn how big the X ring is. Who cares? X's will come, and trust that. What you need to do is learn how big that 10 ring is. Or if you're a little bit, of a new shooter and you're not so good, that's fine. Just learn how big the black is and try to keep them all in the black. Have some sort of a goal that you can set for yourself that you can attain. You need a high goal, but, have a reasonable goal that you can reach most every day. Okay, now like me, my front sight, I'll come down. This is for standing. I'll kind of come down into it, and I'm coming down into it. Okay, that's fine, and I'll stop breathing sometime when the front sight is somewhere around the black. Okay, now I'm ready to break the shot. Now my thought process starts of, okay, now I'm looking for that good solid 10. Okay, and it starts moving around, something kind of like this, and it doesn't really follow a pattern, but it starts moving around a little bit like this. Okay, now as you notice, most of the time my front sight, if I break it anywhere in there, it's going to be a 9 at worst. Okay, and I'm breaking it in there. Now what I'm doing is I'm just looking for that 10. When is it a 10? And I know how big that 10 ring is, and I'm just asking myself, when is it a good solid 10? When is it? Bam. Right there you go. As soon as I see that, as soon as my eye realizes that's a good solid 10, or it's coming in there, it's almost right there, my trigger finger goes now, and it's there. Mm-hmm. I make it a good solid 10 out of the gun. I say now. I almost literally say now with my finger, now, and it's gone, and I make it go. But the whole key thing to this is when you say now and you pull that trigger, okay, no matter how aggressive you get, when you say now, the only thing that you move is that trigger finger. Mm-hmm. If you move anything else, it's not going to be there. Right. It's going to be somewhere else. Because if you move anything else, you're moving the rifle. You can be really aggressive with this, but if you move anything else but that one finger straight back to the rear, that little bit to break that trigger, you've moved the rifle, and all bets are off for shooting a 10 right now. You'll be lucky to hit the target.
Sergeant Benson had mentioned off camera, as a matter of fact, he was talking to these guys. He said, I don't just look at the front sight. I look at a spot of the front sight, a piece of the front sight.
Right.
And interestingly enough, as you started to move the sight around the target, some of the front sight was off of the black, but the center of the front sight, it appears, seemed to be, and then you were saying, well, that's going to be a 10 or a 9.
Right.
Show me, again, where you look on that particular front sight, and what are you trying to concentrate on?
It's the top center edge of that front sight. Right,
the whole blade, or just the middle of it?
Just I'll take it off the bull even just to take the target out of picture here. Right where the tip of my pen is, just the top center edge of it. I mean, the center of just the top edge of that front sight.
So that's where you're able to call the shot.
That's where I'm looking, because, like I said, I hold center mass. So if we put this back on target, and that top center edge is right in the middle. Okay, that's an X. If this top center edge is right over here, I'm probably going to catch a wide 10 on the right. But you see how the left or the right edge of the front sight is kind of off of the black right
white,
here.
Yeah, that's what I was
thinking. It's
thinking.
in the white, but that doesn't matter. The top center edge, and this is why it's so important to be on call to have a good zero, is because you're zeroing that so the impact of the bullet hits the target where that top center edge of the front sight post is in relation to the target. So that's how very important it is to be focused on the front sight, the top center edge right there. So you can watch that top center edge, and you're watching that front sight post wander around the black, and then all of a sudden, bam, there it is.
Now he had mentioned something else, which I found surprising, though, is that he likes a wider blade.
Right.
Because there's more to see.
Okay.
But one would think that, the top center edge, you want to have like a needle point almost. But tell me what you guys...
Okay, this is... I shoot with a standard width front sight. I don't even cut the thing like a lot of people do, like I explained, where they cut the top of it and they slant the back side and the top side. I don't even do that with it. I like the widest front sight post I can get on the rifle, because what that does is we teach... The target is a distraction. Okay, what you need to be looking at is the top center edge of the front sight post. That's what your final focus needs to be at when you're shooting. When that shot breaks, if you're looking anywhere but that top center edge of your front sight post, you don't know where it was. You're not sure because you can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you're not focused there, who's looking at it, really? Right. That's the way I kind of look at it, is if you're not looking at it, who is? And how can you really call your shot if you don't know exactly? If that thing wasn't in focus, how can you really call your shot if that thing wasn't in focus? And so I like a big wide one, and the reason, why? Because it attracts attention. If it's big, you look at it. If it's small, then you'll tend to overlook it and look at the target. So that's why I use bigger is better, kind of like the Grand Am commercial. Wider is better.
Does that help you then in because this calling your shot thing is kind of an estimate of where it is in relation to the circle, which is the black circle, and if you've got half of the wide front post out in the white and half in the black, then that's going to be probably a 9, I guess.
Right, something like that. It all determines where the center of the top of the front sight post was when it broke. Don't worry about the edges. And the reason why we go with a wide one is because it attracts attention to itself and it's easier to look at. Mm-hmm. A front sight post is a lot easier to focus on. It's a lot easier for your eye. And it takes less strain off your eye, too. You could look at it that way. Okay, if you have something wide, it's easy to look at. That's less strain on your eye. Instead of if it's really narrow, then you have to really put some effort into staying focused on it, kind of like a needle point out there. That's hard to stay focused on that one little thing there.
Right.
So it takes up that much more energy. And this game is about, I would say, 90 to 95% mental when you get into it. Okay, your positions and all the physical ability, it really turns down to about 5, maybe 10% physical ability out here. To do this sport. It turns into about 90 to 95% mental, and eye strain comes into it. And when you're focusing so hard, if you have like a needle point front sight out there, and you're focusing, that takes a lot of mental energy. By the time you get done with the match, you're done. You can't hardly, it's just like you've ran 50 miles that day. It literally turns into that at the end of the day.
Well, I see almost that wider post out there gives you more to estimate from as to where, because you're seeing more and it's wider and it kind of helps you determine where that shot screws up.
And another thing that a lot of people, here's kind of a misconception you could say about a wider one is, well, it's harder to determine whether the bull was centered on it, or whether it was how far off of center was it. If you go with a thinner one, then you can determine, well, it was a little bit more off center. You could refine it a little bit more. But the thing is your eye naturally, just like looking at the top center edge of your front sight post, your eye naturally looks at something. When you're looking through like a circle and you're looking at an object through that circle, you naturally want to center that object in the circle. So that's why it's pretty easy to line up your sights. But you have to be looking at that object through the circle. If you're looking, and when we'll go back to the target here, if you're looking at anything but this, let's say if you're looking at the ear of the front sight post, okay, if you're looking at that, just by this representation right here, that if you're looking at that, that's not center. Your eye's going to want to drop this down into the center of the rear aperture right here, so your sights aren't aligned. Okay, so if you're looking at the bull, what does this do to the front sight in relation to the rear aperture? It drops it out of the way because you have to look over the thing to look at the bull. So this front sight drops out of the picture, and your rear sight stays in the same place, but now the bull is centered, and you don't know where this is exactly.
So you start shooting low shots, yeah.
That's another reason why you need to look at this. But as in relation to the target and telling how far off you are, then wider really, it doesn't hurt you because your eye naturally can tell, hey, that's in the center of this thing. Because like when you look at something like like if you would hold your finger up to an object, you can tell if that thing is in the middle. Your eye is just, it's one of those natural kind of things, lining something up in the center of something. It works with just a line also, not just looking through like a square or a circle. You look at it on a line, and it just looks wrong if it's not right in the middle. You're like, oh yeah, that's over on the left side. You can immediately pick up on that. Your eye's pretty acute for picking up things like that. So you go ahead and just trust that sort of thing.
Okay.
And with time, as you're shooting, you can rely on that. You can start. It's an area kind of thing. You're just shooting for the 10 ring. You're not shooting for a mid-ring 10 at 2 o'clock. That's not. You don't necessarily want to get that accurate with it. As long as you're in the general area. If you call it a 10 at 2 o'clock and it comes up a 10 at 1 o'clock, that's fine. That's all fine. If you call it a 10 at 7 o'clock, it comes up a 10 at 6 o'clock, that's fine too. And it doesn't matter whether it's close to the X ring or wide, like close to the 9 ring, as long as it's in the 10 ring in there. Or if you call a wide 10, if you get down to where you can call, like I can call a lot of shots, okay, that's going to be a really wide 10. If it comes up a really wide 10 or a close, just into the 9, it's a 9 but close to the 10 ring, I'll say, oh, okay, I'm still on call. Even though it's in the 9 ring, I'm still on call because it's in the same area, same basic clock position, within a couple inches, in or out. Then, that's just how you're shooting that day.
How often do you practice? And if you were, say, a normal civilian and, didn't shoot all the time for practice, how much dry firing would you do versus live firing, and what would be the combination you think would be recommended?
Well, I think mostly dry firing, and because that's where you get the physical part of it down. You get positions, and you don't get any recoil. So you need to probably live fire if you can every week if you can, but that's not really capable. But at least kind of the more the better. This depends on where you live at in the country. If you live way up north, you're not going to be able to shoot until late April, early May, if that early, and your shooting's done by the end of August, because just because the weather dictates. So you're not going to be able to shoot that much. So you might try to shoot like small bore. You shoot .22 rifle, indoors at 50 foot. That's a popular thing to do in the wintertime, especially up north. And you shoot pistol indoor, same thing like a .22 pistol indoor. Or you can shoot 22 pistol or 22 or pistol outdoors. Shoot 45 stuff. That really helps your rifle shooting because it has to do with sight alignment and trigger control. Also, your dry firing done at home. If you're really serious, you probably do it every day if you can, but if you're like me, you might get to it like once a week, but that's still fine. Once a week thing. If you do it for like an hour or 2 hours, just once a week, that your scores will really drastically improve if you do it just one day a week, for all year long.
Do you combine positions with dry firing? With trigger, everything's
everything's all the same.
So you can the jacket the whole bit.
Exactly, the jacket. You set up your equipment. Have your scorebook. You don't have to fill out your scorebook, but have it set down on there on your stool. Take some empty cartridges and set them up as though if you're had ammo there. If you're just dry firing in your house, don't bring out the live ammo because you might just pop one off in there. But you don't want to do that. But the thing is set everything up just as if you're doing a match. And if you're going to dry fire, if you're not specifically working on one position, you can go as far as, have a little dry fire match for yourself. And you shoot a whole 80-shot course, shoot your 2-siders and then shoot 20 for record. Use your scorebook and call your shots.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sure, and you can do that, and that'll drastically improve calling your shot ability, and it'll drastically improve your scores when you get out to the range because you're already used to leaning down and marking your call, and you say, well, that was a 10, and really be honest with yourself.
So you're going through the motions in a sense.
You're going through the motions, right? And you stand up, shoot a shot, you lean over, you mark, okay, that was a 9 at 9 o'clock. You mark whatever shot number that was, and you pretend to, grab another piece of brass.
And you wear the sling and the whole bit, huh?
That's right. Wear the sling and the whole bit. You need to do that. When you're shooting, if you're dry firing rapid fire, it's kind of hard to do that, but go ahead and sling up, dry fire your 2 shots, and then what you do is you clear the weapon, you stand up. You actually stand up, go through the loading procedure, sit down, close the bolt, snap one, and then you just, cycle it. Take your time. It's not exactly rapid fire, but it's pretty close. Change the magazine. Dry fire some more, and then call your shots. Plot a score out in your scorebook, and try to be honest with yourself. Rapid fire is kind of rough doing that, but go ahead and go through the motions and shoot you a whole 800 aggregate right there, in your basement or in your living room or wherever, and go through the motions, and that'll get you set up. So when you get out to the range, hey, I've done this before.
You've got the procedure down.
Yes, exactly, and that's more than half the battle right there. Then when you get out to the range, you already know where your sling is. You know where your glove is. You know where your scorebook is. You know where all these little items are, your magazines. And you know how to load and unload, do the rapid fire drill of changing your magazine. And then when you get to the range, you can concentrate on shooting and not, you're fumbling around with this and this isn't the right place, and I forgot how to put on my sling, and you run into people like that.
Sure.
Those are the people who don't work on it.
Yeah. Now, is accuracy perishable? Is this the skills that you develop? I mean, do you need to sharpen and hone them and stay with them,
yes.
or will you lose it if you don't do it for
No, you'll lose it to a certain point if you don't train up on it and everything. You won't fall below a certain point, but it's different for everybody. I could go out after 2 months of not shooting and shoot my average score, and then but like if I go right into shooting and training. Like 3 or 4 days into training, my scores might drop below my average for a few days before they come back up. And then that's where I'll notice that, hey, I haven't done this for a while. For the first couple of days, I'm okay, but in the long run of things, I kind of drop off and then I come back up. But for a new shooter, they might, come out and if they haven't practiced for a while, it's like they've never shot before. So it's really important to dry fire at least once every couple of weeks to, hey, remind yourself this is it. And then depends on where you live out in the country and how close is the match held to you, and how many matches do you get to a year. The less matches you shoot every year, the more you have to dry fire at home. And especially if you're going to go to the nationals and shoot the nationals, if you want to do any good up there, you really need to dry fire at least once a week before going up there, and shoot as many matches as you can. But that's all. If you don't have the money to shoot the matches, dry fire. It doesn't cost you anything, and it doesn't wear out your rifle. It doesn't hurt it at all.
Now, you've been shooting for how many years now?
Me, I've been shooting since 1982 is when I first started shooting small bore, and started shooting high power in 1980. I think 6 is when I started shooting that. So
shooting is both challenging and fun, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely! It's one of the most challenging things I've ever known. It's completely and totally individual. I mean, because my score represents what I have done and my talent out there. Even in a team match, it's what I do at the gun is what score I get downrange, and it's very, very challenging. You have to be very specific with everything that you do. You have to be very meticulous. You have to keep records in your scorebooks, because that's the only way you're going to shoot a very good score. And you have to know what your body's doing. You have to know how your body feels. Like I said with the offhand is I run off of what if it feels. Does this feel right? Does that feel right? Does it feel wrong? What's going on here? And the whole time, every time I'm shooting everywhere, my mind is constantly running up and down my body. Does this hurt? Does that feel right? Can I maybe change this a little bit? And I'm thinking that in between each and every shot that I do, in every position, I'm thinking, well, did that go right? Can I change this? And maybe that'll make it better. Well, this doesn't feel right, and I'm sitting here wiggling this to make it feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more stable. And it's a constant battle between my mind and my body. Does this feel right? Does that feel right? Oh, can I do this better? It's constantly a go on, and it's very challenging. It keeps your mind on the go, and you have to be patient also. If you're not a patient person, then shooting, may not, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you. because things in shooting kind of happen slow sometimes. Your score doesn't jump up like it would some other sport. If you train harder and harder and harder with like running, you can get your run time where it's down. If you train harder and harder and harder in shooting, doesn't necessarily mean that your scores are going to go up just because you trained harder than everybody else did that year. That doesn't it doesn't correlate 100% like that. So you got to be patient with some things. And for the shooting sport, is as you're shooting, you hit kind of like plateaus. You'll hit your score. You'll be shooting some scores, and you'll hit this certain score, and you can't shoot above that score. No matter what you do, how much you train, you can't shoot above it. And there's no telling how long you're going to be on that plateau before you go up again. But then, after a while, when you're patient, you just keep on waiting. You wait it out, and you keep on shooting. Then pretty soon your scores jump up, and you're on the rise again. And you don't know how long the rise is. It may be a couple points, or it may be a whole bunch of points. Then it'll flatten back out and go run for a while. And those plateaus, those are the ones that really wear on you mentally because you got to the range. Man, I've been a marksman for 5 years now. Some people are that way, and then they jump right up to expert. They don't even skip, they don't even hit the sharpshooter class. They're like, man, I just jumped all of a sudden.
Wow.
Some people do that. Some people start out and they'll be on this incline, and they'll jump right up to the master class and then hit that wall, and they'll hit that wall forever, and they'll never be a high master. Where some kid's been shooting for 5 years, and he works his way up through every classification. Pretty soon he's a high master. It kind of gets to the other people like, oh, I wish I could shoot that.
Where'd
good.
he come? Yeah.
Yeah, it has to do with a little bit of talent. How talented you are, but it's the talented people don't make it to the top necessarily either. The talented guy made the master class right away, but he didn't make the high master. This kid that has worked throughout the whole thing has learned how to shoot, and he surpasses this talented guy and shoots better than he does in the long run. So it's a lot of patience involved in this sport.
Now for our last segment in this three-part series, here's Staff Sergeant Norm Anderson as he takes us through the 600-yard slow-fire prone position.
I'm Staff Sergeant Norm Anderson. I'm with the Army Marksmanship Unit Service Rifle Team. Today I'm going to demonstrate for you the 600-yard prone slow fire position. This stage of fire consists of 2 sighted rounds fired in a time limit of 2 minutes, 20 rounds for record fired in a time limit of 20 minutes. About this time I'm going to go ahead, they're going to call me the firing line. We'll go ahead and put my earplug in. Prior to calling me up to the firing line, I've already got my ammunition ready. I've already got my scorebook filled out. The last minute things in my scorebook I'll fill out are the light, direction of the light. Do that as such. One of the things I can do with this scorebook is compare it from like my notes from yesterday or last week. Basically compare the conditions I shot in yesterday. Some of the minor changes in light and wind may affect my zero. And zeros are very critical at the 600-yard line because the 600-yard line has to be so precise. Get my scorebook filled out, I set that down. Go ahead and grab my mat.
What are you looking for when you put that mat down?
Basically, when I set my mat down, I just want to make sure that the ground is nice and level, not very lumpy. That's about all you really need for the prone slow fire, because you're going to be laying on the mat the whole time. You're not getting up and laying down on it constantly. Once you get into position, you pretty much stay there. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my scope in position here. The key to putting your scope in position is to make sure that you don't have to get out of position to look into it. I will do my final adjustments once I get strapped into my rifle and in my jacket and everything, but that's pretty close to where it's going to be once I get started. Do a final final check here, get everything where it's easily within reach. I don't have to reach all over for it.
So you've got 22 shots, so we're going to make sure you have all your ammo out, right?
That's right.
Don't want to be digging for it.
Get all my equipment set out. And again, prior to coming to the firing line, I've already got my sights blackened. I've already got my zero on the rifle. I've already got my sling set to proper adjustment for what I need for this position. So basically, once he tells me I can handle my rifle and I can go into my preparation period, I've got the full time of my preparation period to get set up and ready to shoot. Mm-hmm. So that's what he's going to do now. He's going to call me into my prep time, which means I just go ahead and put my jacket on.
Now, the jacket's not as critical as it is in the standing position, but it still does help here.
It still does help you, but no, it's not as critical as standing because you're so much closer to the ground. It's a whole lot easier to build a stable position because you're basically laying on the ground rather than standing up. Also, most shooters will only do the top 2 or 3 buckles on their shooting jacket for prone. Basically, because that helps you keep your lower abdomen free and relaxed for breathing. Plus, you don't need all the support in your hips and everything because your hips aren't going anywhere. You're on the ground. Got my jacket on. I'm gonna go ahead and get strapped into my rifle here. Again, I already have my zero on the rifle. My sling is already adjusted to the right length. Just a matter of putting it on and getting ready to go. Fix the glove.
Now you use a glove versus a mid, huh?
This is true. This is probably the most personal preference part of the game of shooting is the glove. Some people do use a mitt. Some people use a mitt with a glove fitted inside it. Some people use a glove with half fingers. Some people use a glove with full fingers. There's a zillion of them out there. All you got to do is find the one you like.
Mm-hmm. Now, how are you putting that offhand in there into your sling?
Just once I got the sling on my arm, I just come up over the top and back underneath the forearm of the rifle.
Okay.
And then just assume my position.
You've got the pulse thing unzipped?
This is the first jacket I've ever had that feature on it, and I just leave it unzipped for all positions. That's what I do. I know some people that use it zipped, unzipped for standing and zipped for everything else. I just leave it unzipped all day. Mm-hmm. So once I'm strapped in, I'm gonna go ahead and assume the position. As I'm getting down, I just place my lead elbow just off the forward edge of the mat. Again, I'm going to do this final adjustment for my scope. And now I don't have to get out of position to look through my scope. I'm in my preparation period, so I can remove my safety flag and begin dry firing.
And in this dry fire period, what are you trying to do?
I establish my natural point of aim. Make sure my position's not going to fall apart during the string with little checks like my elbow shouldn't be sliding out. I should have plenty of weight on my elbow so that it doesn't slide out. I want to make sure my position is set, my scope, everything's ready to go. And finally, the final stage of the dry firing makes me confident that I'm getting a good sight picture and that I'm ready to shoot well-aimed shots. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to start dry firing. Also, during your preparation period, you want to be checking the mirage, checking wind flags, checking surroundings, getting a good idea of what the wind conditions are like. You'll notice how I go into the scope between every shot. That's just to get a good idea of how the Mirage is changing throughout the course of the string. That will give me a good idea to compare against my calls in an effort to dictate or decide. It'll help me figure out where that shot should be as compared to where that shot is. And once I figure out how I call the shot and I look in the scope, check the Mirage and the wind conditions, if that shot isn't where I believe it should be, then I will move my sights to get me where it should be.
How many shots will you dry fire?
Pardon me?
How many shots will you dry fire?
You want to dry fire a significant number, not one or two. You want to dry fire at least 5 or 6 times to get your routine established, to get a good rhythm going, and have a good idea of what it is you're going to do once you're allowed to start firing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's real critical about prone slow fire from the 600-yard stage is you don't want to stare at the front sight too long. You want to shoot your first sight picture, because your first sight picture is always the best one, as any little error back here is greatly increased over 600 yards. Sometimes you can get away with a mistake at the shorter ranges, but that mistake will burn you right here at the 600-yard line.
So you said you want to shoot quickly. I mean, in a sense, at your first sight picture, you don't want to go ahead and stare at it too long?
Right.
Why? What happens?
Well, the longer you stare at it, the longer your eye goes without oxygen. The longer your eye goes without oxygen, the harder it has to work to focus, to maintain focus. So you actually see better the first 2 seconds into your hold than you do the last 5 seconds. Obviously, you want to shoot a well-aimed shot when you're seeing your best, not seeing garbage. So that's why we shoot the first sight picture, and we always try to get it off pretty quick. Okay, as my preparation period comes to a close, I do a quick check to make sure that what I'm thinking is right or is correct for the wind is correct. I still believe that my initial call of six clicks left is good, so I put that on the rifle. He's going to tell me to load. I grab my first round, my first sighter. And as my targets come up, I can fire. Called that shot pretty good. Maybe just a little bit on the right side. I checked my Mirage. The Mirage looks about the same as it was, so that shot should come up in the 10 ring at 3 o'clock or so.
So you're checking your Mirage to see that it didn't change from when you shot, before you shot, to when you did shoot.
Right.
So that your call will be accurate.
Right. Right. If that shot comes up other than where I called it, there's a good chance that something happened with the conditions that I didn't see.
And if it's not the conditions, then there's a position or something else, right?
There's a multitude of things it could be, but for the most part, I've got it narrowed down to conditions or an inaccurate 0.
Ah, okay.
So, shot came up, it's a 10 at 9 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock. So that tells me I was just about a half minute off on my wind call, so I come 1 click right and shoot my second sighter.
Now, how fast do you want to shoot your sighters? Does it matter to you, or?
I shoot my sighters just about the same cadence I'm ready to shoot the string. And a lot of times the condition will dictate that. If the wind is blowing real fast and changing a lot, I'll generally shoot faster so I don't have to shoot through as many wind changes. Because obviously the less wind changes you have to shoot through, the better off you are. I mean, I like to finish my string between 11 and 14 minutes. There are days when I can get done in about 8 minutes, and there's days where I have to lay down for about 16. But generally between 10 and 14 is what I like what I like to get done. So before I shoot my second sighter, I check my wind again. All right, it's picked up, so I'm gonna put that left one back on it. That shot should be pretty good. Should be pretty close to the center. Now, without any break or anything, I would just go ahead and start into my string as this shot comes up. Okay, it's in the center. I'm ready to go. Wind's okay. Plop my last shot. Okay, called that one pretty good. Got my second shot. Get ready to go. Here we go. Okay, target's up. And I would continue that until I was out of bullets. Okay? Now, there's some things that can happen to you on the rifle range, primarily at the 600-yard line. And some of those things are, in fact, getting caught in wind changes. It happens to even the best shooters, and it's going to happen every day. So what you need to be prepared for is that it doesn't get into your head, doesn't get into your shooting program. The reason for that is if you appear to be whipped on the firing line, then your competitors already know that you are. And there's nothing more I like to see than somebody else that knows he's whipped, because that just tells me I'm beating him. Some of the things that can go along with your prone, as you progress as a shooter, you'll notice your groups start to get smaller and smaller. What you want to strive for is holding good elevation. What's good elevation for a new shooter? For a new shooter, keeping them all within the scoring rings. And then as you progress, maybe next month you want to keep them all within the 6 ring. And then the month after that, maybe try to keep them all in the black. It's just a state of progression. That's how people get better. You have to learn this before you can learn that. You have to crawl before you can walk. Once you get a little bit more familiar with looking through the sights at the 600-yard target, you'll get a little bit more particular about your point of aim. And that's how your hold will naturally get smaller. You'll make small refinements in your position that allow your hold to get that much better.
How much movement do you see with your sights from the 600-yard position?
When I'm shooting slow prone, I don't detect any visible movement as I'm squeezing the shot off. Once I get my position adjusted to where I want it, if you notice when I was laying down, I do a little twitching and a little bit of finessing here and there. All that is fine-tuning my natural point of aim to be perfect 6 o'clock on my target. Once I get that, I inhale and exhale one final time, take the slack out of the trigger, and once the sights stop where I want it, I knock the shot off. But as far as what kind of movement I get as I'm aiming, I don't get much at all.
And that's because of the solid prone position.
Right. The prone position is the most fun to shoot because the position is in fact the easiest position. However, the 600-yard stage is the most difficult because of the accuracy requirement to point a good shot on that target.
Mm-hmm. Now you take that breath, and now when you take the breath, does the sight go up with your breath and down and then settles?
It should go fairly straight up and down. Some people notice it goes from like 1 or 2 o'clock to like 7 or 8 o'clock.
Uh-huh.
That's not uncommon. A lot of it depends on how your position is structured. No two people are exactly alike, so everybody's position is just a little bit different. But it should go generally straight up and down. It shouldn't go left or right.
Uh-huh. And it should be consistent too, I guess.
Right, absolutely. With every breath you take, it should follow the same path.
Okay. Now, when you see that, you take that breath, it comes back, and it starts to settle in and settles in, then does it actually stop for you?
Right. That's how it should. It should. Once you once you completely exhaust your lungs of air, you're going to be resting on nothing but flesh and bone. And once you're resting on that flesh and bone, it should be a solid contact with the ground, and basically nothing more involved. So it should come to a stop.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you squeeze the trigger, you don't have to be as aggressive with the trigger here at this position, I guess, as you do, say, with a rapid fire position.
Again, it all depends on condition. I don't like to try to milk the trigger. I don't like to finesse the trigger into going off. When that shot goes off, it's because I wanted it to go off. What I mean by condition dictates, say I'm in one of those howling winds with changes, 2 or 3 minute changes. I've got to be able to get on the sights and get that shot knocked off so I can get ready for the next one. I don't need to be spending a lot of time trying to drag that trigger to the rear. When that shot goes off, it's because I want it to. Mm-hmm. We like to call it more of a trigger control rather than a trigger squeeze, because as long as your trigger control is smooth, it can be fast, it can be slow, whatever the condition dictates.
How does this position differ from, say, the 300-yard prone positions?
The position itself should be set up fairly similar. I know some people that loosen their sling up a notch because you have to be in it for 20 minutes. That is the key, is it has to be comfortable enough for you to survive it for 20 minutes. But fundamentally, the position should be the same as the 300.
So I suppose the last thing you want to do is in the 2 or 3 shots and then get up and change your position.
Right.
You want to be comfortable enough to be able to stay there for a while.
Right, absolutely. When you're in your preparation period, you should have all the bugs worked out. So once you shoot your first sighter, you're laying in the same spot that you are when you get up from shot 20. Mm-hmm. The consistency is the key to this game. Therefore, not getting up, not moving in between shots, that stuff just shouldn't happen. One of the things you can do to help get yourself ready endurance-wise for a 20-minute string of slow prone is while you're laying down watching TV in the afternoon or in the evening after dinner, go ahead and put your sweatshirt and your jacket on, sling on your rifle, and lay there and watch TV, and just point the rifle at the TV for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. That's a good endurance builder there. You can also do holding exercises where you just simply get in position and point the rifle until you go to sleep on it. But I'm a firm believer in dry firing, especially right after dinner when you're watching TV, you're not doing anything else. It's great for building muscle memory and muscle endurance.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anything else particular about this 600-yard spot?
600-yard line can make you or break you. A lot of matches are won or lost here. This is the bread and butter of the shooting match right here. Anybody can shoot a 10 from 200 yards. It takes a good shooter to shoot a 10 from 600 yards.
This has been Volume 3 of a 3-part series titled High Power Rifle Competition, Mind Over Matter, brought to you by the Civilian Marksmanship Program. We'd like to remind you that when shooting any firearm, safety is our primary concern, and it should be yours too. For more information, please contact the Civilian Marksmanship Program. I'm Lenny McGill. Thanks for watching.